Standardville was constructed by a coal mining company according to a well-engineered town plan designed to set a new standard in company-built mining towns. The seeds of Standardville were sown in 1912 when coal began to be mined from the valley, and by 1917 Standardville was constructed. The miners and their families were housed in modern, steam-heated homes complete with landscaping. Many of the town residents were immigrants who had come to the U.S. from Italy and Greece. Standardville was a company town through and through, with most of the establishments, such as the store, hospital, and recreational hall, owned by the Standard Coal Company. The town was designed to keep miners and their families happy in their little valley. The happiness did not last, however. Standardville in the 1920s was a stage for several notable labor incidents. One such incident occurred in June 1922, when striking miners attempted to prevent a train full of strikebreakers from entering the town. The striking miners ambushed the incoming train just as it emerged from a tunnel. Gunfire echoed off the canyon walls as strikers fired on the train. The strikebreakers returned fire. Though short, the battle did result in the death of one Arthur Webb, who was employed by the mining company as a guard, but was acting as an engine stoker on board the train. Other combatants received only wounds. The killing of Arthur Webb resulted in the governor of Utah declaring martial law and ordered the National Guard to the area to reestablish order. Public sentiment against unions grew, and many of the strikers were defamed as being un-American. The years after World War II saw the implementation of new safety laws and rising expenses spent on accessing deeper veins of coal. The mine was closed in 1950, and with it, any reason to stay in the town. By 1954, the residents had moved on, and the town was dead. Grafton is one of the oldest ghost towns in Utah and is certainly one of the most scenic ghost towns in the United States. The story of Grafton began in 1849 when the town was established in order to grow cotton. Brigham Young, the leader of the LDS Church, wanted to make Utah, known as Deseret at the time, a self-sufficient territory, so he sent colonists to various parts of the territory to build towns and produce the raw materials needed to establish self-sufficiency. Grafton was first established along the banks of the Virgin River. The townspeople quickly regretted their first choice of location when the Virgin River flooded and swept part of the town away. On the night of the dramatic flood, a one Mrs. Tenney was in labor giving birth to a son. Floodwaters began flowing through the cracks of their simple cabin, and it was immediately clear that Mrs. Tenney needed to be moved before the cabin was destroyed. Mr. Tenney, along with some neighbors, placed his wife in a wagon box, where she was floated to higher ground, and just in the nick of time. Their cabin was swept from its foundations and carried away with the raging floodwaters. The experience so impressed the Tenneys that they named their newborn son Marvelous Flood Tenney. The town site was moved to a different location after the flood, but all was not plain sailing for Grafton. By the 1860s, the pioneers had established homes surrounded by fields and orchards. The cotton-growing venture achieved only mild success. During the 1860s, tensions with the local Native Americans increased to the point where some of the local natives raided Grafton and left some of the settlers dead. Some of the headstones in Grafton Cemetery bear witness to this tragic fact. Southern Utah in the 1870s saw a surprising shift in agriculture, going from cotton to mulberry trees and silk. Grafton during this period became a modest producer of silk for about 20 years. By the 1890s, other local settlements in the county outgrew Grafton, and many people moved away in search of better opportunities. In the late 1920s, the town was identified as an ideal location for Hollywood westerns, and the first talkie, filmed outside of a studio, called In Old Arizona, was filmed in Grafton in 1928. In Old Arizona was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, and is known as an early motion picture treasure today. As a film set, the town grew during this period. The real population of Grafton remained small and finally became zero in 1944. Grafton, however, remained a semi-popular setting for movies. The most famous movie filmed in Grafton is 1969's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Grafton is among the most visited ghost towns in Utah and has been placed in a state of arrested decay. Grafton also hosts one of the prettiest races in the West each November for the Butch Cassidy 10K. Frisco has the dubious honor of being at one time the wildest town in Utah and possibly the western U.S. It all began in 1875 when two miners made a discovery of silver in the San Francisco mountain range in Utah. They dug a shaft incredibly rich with ore. Hedging their bets, they sold their claim for $25,000 in 1876. The new owner named the mine the Horn Silver Mine, after the way the silver was found in the shape resembling a ram's horn. Rich ore yields meant more mines and the birth of a town. The town might have been called San Francisco after the mountain range it was located in, but wisely chose to avoid confusion and lawsuits with the more famous city in California, so the town was named Frisco. Frisco was a hard town full of hard people. Water was very scarce and had to be piped in from distant springs or shipped in via wagon. The scarcity and high price of water led to alcohol being the preferred way to quench a thirst. 23 saloons, as well as gambling dens and brothels, spoiled the miners for choice in ways they could spend their hard-earned wages. Crime, including murder, was rampant in the town, so much so that apparently a meat wagon made frequent rounds of Frisco to collect bodies for burial. The crime became so problematic that the town fathers hired Marshal William Pearson from Pioche, Nevada, another hard-mining, hard-drinking town. It is said that upon his arrival, Pearson made it known that he had no intention of arresting or jailing anyone. The way he saw it, lawbreakers had two choices: either skip town or buy a coffin. Apparently no one cared to take the new lawman seriously, and 6 men ended up in Boot Hill Cemetery during his first night on the job. After that, the town became quieter. Frisco was made up of more than rough saloons and seedy brothels. Children attended school, people attended church. Hotels housed visitors, and the Frisco Times kept the citizenry informed with news from the wider world. Frisco's glory ended on February 12, 1885, when as the day shift was preparing to enter the Horn Silver Mine, they experienced what they must have thought was an earthquake, but really was the mine collapsing. At the time of the collapse, the depth of the mine was nearly 1 kilometer deep. Astonishingly, no one was killed in the collapse. Another shaft was soon sunk, but the silver ore veins proved too difficult to access, and Frisco dwindled. Mining continued on a smaller scale until 1920, when no one had a permanent residence in Frisco. Today, most of the original town site and its buildings are on privately owned property, though the beehive kilns that once fed the smelters before the railroad reached the town are publicly accessible and still reek of heavily charred wood.